Welcome to the August 24th, 2017 episode of Reactive Consciousness, our in-depth podcast about what happened this week in our lives. I'm your host, VyseTheBold, and this is...
Lotus Prince.
And OldManStompy.
Once again, Pyro is off frolicking in a leafy glade. I don't know where else he would be.
Lord of the Rings? Is he killing off barrel whites with but a thought?
You're not his mom. You don't know what he's up to. Lay off him, man. Guy can live his own life.
Yeah. But yeah, OldManStompy has a fantastic wrestling topic for this week. If you could get into it.
Sure, I'd be happy to, and thanks for inviting me to talk about it. So this last weekend was SummerSlam weekend. So for those not familiar with the WWF schedule, they have 4 major seasonal pay-per-views, and they've had this basically since the mid-'80s. WrestleMania is obviously the big one in the spring, but that's usually followed up by SummerSlam in the fall. And the idea is that WrestleMania is the face show. All the good guys win, they complete their character arcs. And then at SummerSlam, 3 months later, oftentimes the heels win to set up the next 8 months worth of storyline leading back into WrestleMania. So it's a show with a very distinctive feel compared to WrestleMania, and it also has a very important place in the storytelling arc. And over the years, that weekend has grown to be larger and larger.
It's basically the start of the storyline for the year that ends in WrestleMania, right?
Yeah, basically.
Gotcha.
So it's become like a 4-day extravaganza. Prior to SummerSlam, they have an NXT pay-per-view, which is the developmental system the WWF has. So you get to see all the big upcoming stars they're planning on promoting in the next few months once they get out of NXT onto the main roster. And then they also tape the 2 live television shows on the following 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, usually with the same crowd. Often it's an international crowd that came from all over the world to watch SummerSlam. Then they stay and they watch Raw and SmackDown. So the crowd is usually really hot. It's usually very very smarky, very savvy. They're very into the product, for better or for worse. Sometimes they literally take over the show. So it's an interesting 4 days to watch. And I will say that for all the pomp and circumstance, they started the weekend off with the single most important thing on Friday, which had nothing to do with any of the action in the ring. It was actually the release of Southpaw Regional Wrestling Season 2.
The best. I was so happy
on Friday. So I actually didn't know that it was so close to coming out. We had a whole segment on last week's podcast where we talked about how much we loved.
It was kind of coincidental.
Season. Yeah, then so I had known actually that Chris Jericho, who played Clint Bobsky in Southpaw Season 1,
Oh, it was him.
he had left WWF a few months ago to go back to touring, and he had made a 1-day appearance on SmackDown to challenge for one of their titles, and he had actually done that partially to go off and film another season's worth of Southpaw.
That is amazing.
Because John Cena and Fandango and Tyler Breeze and most of the other major players, they were all on the SmackDown roster. The only guys I think who aren't are Chad Too Bad and Tex Ferguson.
So what does Chris Jericho do? What does he tour on his own for? Does he have a band or something?
He has a band called Fozzy. They used to be a tribute band, and part of the joke was that he tried to create a wrestling persona. I think his name was Moon Goose McQueen.
What?
And his gimmick was that he was the only rock star, and that every other band was a tribute band of him.
Nice. Every band.
It's so infuriating. It's like, no, they're copying me. No,
Yeah.
no.
It's like I did this song originally. It's like I saw the smoke on the water.
That's really good.
So he eventually he's a big fan of a lot of classic rock bands, and so he molded his own band in their image, and now he tours on his own.
Nice.
And occasionally he provides theme songs for WWF pay-per-views. He has his own podcast.
Oh, nice.
It's okay, not as good as ours, but you know.
But really, what is?
It's not as self-deprecating. That's for sure.
Yeah, I have more humility than all of you put together.
I am the one who is most humble here.
Yeah.
Well, we can talk about who's the most humble all day. But back to wrestling. Apparently you can film the entire season. It's only about a half an hour in runtime in a day, which makes sense if you realize if you take a look at the production values and
they're purposefully low.
I've noticed that John Cena posted on his Instagram pretty much immediately after the second season was released another new title card for Southpaw Regional Wrestling. That implies the 2 seasons they take place in a fictional wrestling promotion in 86 and 87. So the new title card he posted kind of implies that the next season will take place late 80s, early 90s. Which is kind of surprising because everybody in Southpaw Wrestling is completely incompetent, and I'm amazed that they survived.
Yeah, not to mention season 1 ended with until next time, if there is one.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the shtick is that it's all promo, but I think it would be cool to have a couple really goofy matches thrown in there for later on.
Sure, I don't want to go into too much detail about the second season because, I know, Vice, you haven't watched it yet, and I'm sure our viewers like the opportunity if they're interested in it to go check it out for themselves. Yeah. Again, it's only about 30 minutes for 6 episodes, 5 minutes apiece, and it's got, I think, better continuity than the actual WWF.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying that in the YouTube comment section. This is the best story they have. Oh, and by the way, speaking of story, one thing I should push though is that Season 2 is a prequel, so if you're wondering, where did that guy in Season 1 go, or how come that hasn't been developed, it's because it took place before. Season 1 is the latest in the chronology.
Yeah, they actually call it, Episode 1. I think it's supposed to be, the first, more or less, episode of Southpaw. That's why it begins with that little musical number that I know Lotus enjoyed very much. It's kind of like a parody of, I think it's called the Wrestle Rock Rumble, which I think was itself a parody of the Super Bowl Shuffle.
I was just gonna say that sounds like the Super Bowl Shuffle to me.
Yeah, so you've got a lot to look forward to in only 30 minutes.
Yeah, there's a surprising amount of storytelling that goes on just through implication. Different characters act differently in season 2 than they do in season 1, and it's so they must have gone from there to here, so just even if they don't show you what happens, that something happens to change people into a certain way or whatever. It's kind of amazing.
So as a bit of an offshoot from this, the guys who play Chet Cheddarfield and the Banker, they're a tag team on actual SmackDown, and they've started They were a tag team called the Fashion Police. One of them was a ballroom dancer, and the other one was a male model. That was their persona on actual WWF television.
Please tell me that Chet Cheddarfield was the male model.
He is not the male model.
Too bad.
So I will say that during the scene where Chet takes his shirt off, he's supposed to be an announcer who got left by his wife. Yeah. And since he has a wrestler's physique, he is far too attractive to play his own character.
Yeah, he's supposed to look like a schlub. Yeah, he looks awful all the time, until he takes his shirt off. Yeah, when he's supposed to look his worst.
He's supposed to be somebody who's let himself go.
Yeah, he's got this bald wig with a really bad comb over. He wears clothes that. The way he slouches look loose-fitting, and he just doesn't care. But then he's forget it, man, and he takes off his clothes, and it's oh, he actually looks better.
This is I like him better this way.
Yeah, he's supposed to be just this is off the deep end, but it's well, actually, this guy works out as part of his job, so...
Yeah. So yeah, their characters, they actually started doing, takeoffs of 80s TV shows.
Yeah.
So they did a Miami Vice one, they did a Twin Peaks one, they did an X-Files one. I guess that's the 90s.
Wait, Miami Vice?
Yes, Miami Vice. They're the Fashion Police. They were doing all these old 80s cop shows.
Miami VyseTheBold?
Yes, Miami VyseTheBold. They were very bold. It's some of the best character work I've seen on the WWF in a long time, and it's not surprising that they also can't have the acting chops to play good actors playing really bad actors.
Yeah, that's not easy.
Southpaw.
And by the way,
I was really amazed that John Cena was able to, even create a cadence.
Yeah,
for his character.
This is your Lance Catamaran. He's able to pull it off the whole time, and also get frustrated that things are going wrong.
There's a momentary scene where he's supposed in the second season where he's supposed to do a spit take
Yeah.
when he sees like a debuting tag team, and the cut to him is just a bit too fast, so that you can see him holding the water in his mouth and then turn to the side and go, pff, and the comic timing is off just enough.
Yeah,
that's great.
Like it's hard to be bad. Well.
Yeah, and I know. Actually, speaking of which, this part has nothing to do with the acting.
Bad, well.
Yeah, no, for real. Like, because like, you can be bad at acting.
You're
bad.
good at being.
Yeah, well,
bad.
I'm using poor syntax on purpose to convey like the sense of what they're trying to accomplish.
No,
like,
but like
it's
the thing I saw in episode 1, and they continued it, but it really impressed me. And this isn't even acting, but regarding doing bad effectively, this actually really impressed me. Was when John Cena was saying, like, and we got a wrestling match coming up, just you wait. It's the, what was it, like the Smackdown in the Swamp or Struggle in the Swamp or whatever it was?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah,
Showdown
it's Showdown in the Swamp. It's going to be in Municipal Stadium on such and like August, whatever, 1986. And as he's saying it, they put the information there in writing on the screen.
Yeah.
Now, today, if you saw that done today, it would be in large enough type on the bottom of the screen. But this is really large, like, where you would think, as an editor, if I were to make a video, what would make the most sense? So you put it right in the center of the screen, but it's totally covering his face as he's talking, so you can't really see John Cena behind the title, and it doesn't really matter, but it kind of does.
How appropriate that you can't see him.
No, I know. But, like, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, because all he's doing is giving the information, but it really kind of does. Like, the announcer, who's taking up the whole screen, is being obscured by this text.
I don't know if you noticed, but during that scene, they're also playing a second pre-recorded version of his speech.
Oh, really?
Like
I think I missed that.
When they overlay the whole screen over him, there's a cut in his speech where you can tell that he stopped talking.
Oh, that's great. I didn't even notice that.
So that's what's so funny about his cadence too. He's playing someone. He's not reading off cue cards, but he's playing someone who is reading off of cue cards.
Yeah,
and that's very hard to convey.
And by the way, I also like the way they again with the editing, I like the way they cut to commercial at kind of like the most potentially awkward time, where like he's ranting at somebody off screen, and then he's just like, "Oh, we're rolling. How long have we been rolling?
Like
long enough." And then just cuts to a card. It's so good.
With a word from our sponsor.
No, it's not even that. Like, how long have we been rolling? You don't hear anything.
Mm-hmm.
Long enough, and it just cuts to a card. We'll be right back. It's super funny.
So I know Lotus showed me a wrestling promo that he had found of an actual like regional champion.
It
from
was
the 80s,
awful.
who was like very clearly reading from cue cards extremly badly.
It was
and it was a pre-tape segment.
Beaniest.
Well, no, the thing is, it sounds like he's reading. Like, it was that part from Inferno Cop where that dinosaur attacked, and the guy's like, "Oh my god, it's a John McGann." He's clearly like trying to pronounce what he's reading off of his card.
It's like Garcia Hotspur like trying to.
No, he was just trying to read, but like this guy is like acting.
Oh yeah.
But he drops the acting voice because he's like, "I can't believe it's a Dilophosaurus." Like it sounds like he's trying to just get through the line. Like the wrestling promo is kind of like that. It sounds like he's reading, and it's disappointing. Like, I'm gonna meet you at the ring, and it's like it loses its thread.
So there's a couple of guys, and I just want to retell these stories briefly, who basically ruined their careers like very recently in the last year and a half by messing up like that on a live promo on SmackDown even today.
But that makes it better years later.
There was a luchador, his name's Kalisto. He's very talented as a wrestler, but he doesn't give very good promos. And they asked him to say a few words because he won a fan award that he was not expected to win. Oh. So he wasn't prepared to give a speech. So he's like talking about how he's excited to win this award, and all of a sudden he just like loses his train of thought, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna do a good lucha thing." Woo! and then you can hear him go, "God damn it!" like off camera somewhere. And they caught all of that on the microphone.
Didn't like Booker T recently say something particularly bad?
So Booker T is really famous for dropping an N-bomb on a pay-per-view.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
And this was a long time ago.
Oh, okay. I thought that was a recent thing. Okay.
Yeah, so he was delivering a promo to Hulk Hogan, and and he says like, Hulk Hogan, we're coming for you, and then he drops an N-bomb, and he looks at the camera and he like hides his hands in his face, like, oh man,
and everybody else is giggling, like, oh man,
like, oh god, I fucked up.
No, I think my favorite example of not a guy messing up, well, I mean, this clearly was a guy messing up, but like the verbalization is not the guy lamenting his own mistake. It was when he first introduced to the Shockmaster, where he busts a hole in the wall. It's like, oh shit, but he like trips over the hole and he just falls on his face. And apparently, like, I didn't notice this at first, but OldManStompy mentioned you could hear Ric Flair like off camera in the background going like, oh my god, or something like that. It's like, oh no.
So this makes me think of do you know the classic old classic rock song Louie Louie? Like Louie Louie,
like the easiest piano song on the planet.
Yeah, but nobody knows what the words are because nobody can understand the vocalist.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, well, no, this has been a thing that's been going on for a long time. In fact, they thought the song was very subversive because you couldn't understand him, so therefore you must be saying something terrible.
Oh, wow.
But what the funny thing is that there is an audible like recording of the like they only recorded it once because like that's part of the reason why the vocals are so bad or so poorly recorded is they only had enough money to record once.
Oh no!
This is like a garage band essentially, back in the 50s, and it's a song that exploded. They're a one-hit wonder basically.
Yeah.
But like they made a ton of money off of one song, and it was just popular. And it's also a cover of a song that has a version that's much easier to understand, which is really funny because Congress spent time analyzing this song when they could have just listened to the original version.
Well, couldn't you have also just asked
and found out what they were saying?
But couldn't you have just asked? You could just ask.
Well, no, I think they were British, and these were Americans during, like, McCarthy era, so they weren't smart enough to just go up to them and ask them, like, in England.
Yeah.
The resources just weren't there, right?
Okay.
So, but, they thought hippies and socialists were going to take over. Anyway.
Yes.
But there is an audible screaming of fuck when the drummer like drops his drumsticks while playing while recording, and it's been on the radio forever.
That's great.
And if you're listening for it, you could be like, "Oh shit, that's where it is." Like it's much more audible than any of the other words in the song, other than Louie Louie.
Fantastic.
Remind me if this is true or an urban legend, but I believe there's also one of the Beatles songs where you can hear that on the live track. I think it's "Hey Jude."
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That is Ringo. Yeah, also the drummer. Yeah. So like, but because like, I mean that takes the most physicality, I think, pretty much. For a drummer, you have to be extremely coordinated. So
sure.
like, but it's just funny that you have two songs like that have. You're especially Louie Louie. You have a whole song that you're trying to find out what's naughty about it, and like the naughtiest thing you completely glance over.
And it wasn't supposed to be there.
No, it was a flub.
Yeah, That's great.
Oh, to loop this back around to wrestling just a little bit. So I noticed that yesterday there was also a guy who gave a promo on that was posted to Twitter, where there was a rumor that he was in trouble with the company, and so the reporter comes backstage to ask him, like, what do you have to say about the rumors? And he says something like, people need to keep their business out of my nose. It just like messes up the phrase.
He reverses it.
Yeah, and then he stops and thinks, and then he says it the same thing a second time, like he really meant it.
I was right.
And then he gets
he doubles down on it,
bouncing around.
That's great.
He doubles down on his mistake.
I'll just do some footwork and some shadow boxing, and maybe everybody will forget that it is completely.
It's like the Ashley Simpson hoedown. It's like the Ashley Simpson hoedown. Like they start playing her backing vocal, and she starts dancing around like, nothing to see here, folks.
So yeah, it looks like whatever trouble he was actually in, he probably just made it worse for himself by flubbing a promo at a major wrestling pay-per-view, probably the most important match of his life. So
wow.
So sucks for him.
Jeez.
Anyway, Moving on to Saturday. So, of course, I think Lotus and we both watched Southpaw just before we went to record this podcast today.
That was a freaking treat. And just real quick, I do want to say it was rather refreshing seeing Lance Catamaran and Chet Cheddarfield actually be into the show and having banter and doing what they're supposed to be doing.
So we see Chet before he broke up with his fiance, the woman Susan that he's pining after all of season 1. And, it's great that he's enthusiastic, but it's still appropriate for Southpaw because he's obviously an incredible creep.
Yeah, obviously. But I mean, I just like though, just the disparity, because in season 1, Lance Catamaran is obviously just well, I guess I'd better do my job because I'm surrounded by fools and I don't know, they're telling me to do it, so I'm going to do it. I'll try salvaging whatever I can. And Chet just does not give a fuck. He's done. And just, it's really interesting to see them, actually have any kind of energy at all in season 1. Before everything's gone... Or in season 2, excuse me, before everything's gone down.
There's also a lot of, subtle and not-so-subtle jabs at how shitty it was to be a female wrestler, in the 80s.
Oh,
because,
man,
for example,
yeah.
there's a segment where they start teasing the first female wrestler to debut in Southpaw, and John Cena as Lance, is convinced it can't possibly be a woman.
Yeah,
it's a
is
it's
it
a
a
running
little
gag.
man?
It's a tiny man, a tiny misshapen man.
That kind of goes back to in Futurama, they have Leela as the first professional Blurnsball woman, but because she's terrible, not because she's good at the sport, but because people want to laugh at her.
Yeah, and all the other actual women stars in sports were really getting on our case. They're we remember because we were fucking good. It's just oh.
Yeah. So this is an opening gag to Southpaw this season too. I think it's the banker issues a $10,000 open challenge, and the reporter who's interviewing him is "Oh, I'll take that challenge." He's "No, it is not for you."
Literally anyone but you. That was amazing.
So yeah, that was Southpaw. I won't spoil absolutely everything for our viewers. Not all the jokes.
I thank you for that.
Yeah, it's great.
Instead, we spoiled The Stand for pretty much every viewer, and
yeah.
About it.
Well, I don't know if 27 years is enough time to give somebody before we start having to issue spoiler warnings.
I've told Lotus this before, but one of my favorite things that happened to me in real life was I was a senior in high school, and Troy was going to debut on
this is the dumbest shit. Yeah,
on that Friday, and I was have fun watching Brad Pitt die, and she goes, "Why'd you say that?" I was the story's 4,000 years old. Yeah. I didn't see it.
Not literally one of the oldest stories known to man.
Yeah, not to mention you may well have read it in high school already, the Iliad or the Odyssey, and even the Odyssey basically explains what happens, I think, with Achilles. So it's you had your chance.
It's not a surprise even in the book. It's kind of like Romeo and Juliet. In Romeo and Juliet, they tell you they're going to die.
Well, not only that, when Romeo and Juliet came out in the 1500s,
it was
already a famous poem at the time. So even the people who first went to the first showing of the Shakespeare play already knew what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm. I guess it's interesting to have context before you go into things.
Yeah, but I mean, The Stand may be something that somebody might actually want to read, and it hasn't been oversaturated in our media.
Spoiler warning.
It hasn't been something that has been overspoiled because it's basically there for only Stephen King nerds and people that have, I guess, watched the TV series. But
yeah.
That's fair enough, and I guess, it is supposed to be one of his most famous books. Maybe not so much anymore as The Dark Tower, but it's supposed to be one of his most iconic books.
It's probably his best standalone book. Standalone. Anyway, but no, that and The Shining, I guess, that. But no, I think we should warn them.
Yeah. Like I said, when I put it up on YouTube, I'll put a little spoiler tag.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well,
Little bit
there
of
probably
Omek
won't be
here for
any
the,
stand spoilers in Recon today. So for those of you who came to this having seen the spoiler warnings already on Tuesday,
That's a good point. We're recording this before I uploaded the Coricon.
you're probably safe.
Yeah. Retroactive spoiler warning.
However, I may be discussing spoilers of things that happened at wrestling events that happened yesterday. So if you want to
that's
watch yourself
okay.
on the
You can
WWE Network.
You can spoil sporting events. Come on.
That's
It's like spoiling. It's like spoiling like the weather. Oh, it rained yesterday. Oh, no.
Well, no, but spoiling. Like with the internet, it's a bit different. But spoiling sports events really used to be a thing. Like that was actually one of the first jokes in the entire Seinfeld series, where Kramer walks in like, "Well, the Yankees sure blew it last night." Oh, come on! Like I taped that.
Yeah, but now you can't avoid it, so like nobody cares.
Well,
you know,
I will say that like on Reddit and some other associated sites where they discuss wrestling, there's sort of a 24-hour moratorium for people who didn't get to watch the show live the previous night to catch up, where you're not allowed to post like spoilers in the headers of things, and you have to be really careful. So I would say like 24 to 48 hours is the window of spoilers for major professional wrestling events. After that, like it's all over Facebook anyway, so who cares?
Oh, so for Recon, then I guess we're just good.
Usually the champion is like giving interviews on like Good Morning America and the Today Show.
I mean,
so
come on.
So yeah,
I've avoided Game of Thrones spoilers pretty well, except I know one thing that I shouldn't, and that's about it.
Yeah, I'm starting to know a couple of things, and it's bugging me a little bit.
I know a lot of things I shouldn't, just because it's unavoidable, and I'm not going to talk about any of them because, again, it would just make Lotus have to post a whole bunch of other warnings.
Yeah, not to mention I would have to log off the Skype chat immediately too.
Mm-hmm.
I know more about Jon Snow than I should.
Yeah, same with me, but I'm not even going to go into hints about that. But yeah, that's I know what you're talking about.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
sure. It's really frustrating because my parents, they know I read the books. They still keep asking me questions, even though I've told them years ago that I don't know anything about what happened in the show as it pertains to the books. They keep asking me about what I expect to happen. Like, is this supposed to happen? Do you know anything about this character? And they're like, no, you tell me. Stop asking me these questions. You're spoiling the show for me now, too.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So, wrestling.
So, yeah, wrestling. So, part of what was so exciting about this weekend was that it's actually the second time I've ever been to a major wrestling event, well, a wrestling event at all. And the first one was a house show. It was a major house show. It was in the Allstate Arena in Chicago.
Did you hold a sign?
I did not hold a sign. I didn't think that far ahead.
You should have been like OldManStompy 316.
No, it should have been Corrective Consciousness, like, podcast.
The favorite one I've seen recently is one that just says, like, Roman Reigns mains Hanzo. Like, people are just so mean to Roman Reigns, and he doesn't deserve it.
I need healing. Oh, no, that's Genji.
Is Hanzo a low-tier character in Overwatch? Is that what that is?
It is a joke that if you want to say somebody's a scrub, you tell them that they main Hanzo in Overwatch.
Because they're very easy to pick up?
He's a popular beginner character, yes.
Okay, I gotcha. So it's like playing as Ryu or whatever.
Yeah, basically in that vein. So yes, it's supposed to be an insult to say that he mains Hanzo. It's not just supposed to be esoteric.
Gotcha.
Although for a lot of wrestling fans who aren't familiar with video games, it probably is very esoteric.
Yeah.
Well, I only just got it. Like, only just.
So a brief aside on the topic of signs. Someone found a sign on the WWE Network from fucking 2003, I think, from a Matt Hardy match.
Jeez.
that said Matt Hardy will be deleted.
Oh,
and it's like, is this guy a time traveler?
It's like that lady in a black and white movie on the cell phone.
Oh yeah, it's like 11 years
Charlie
ago.
Chaplin movie.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, so I went to the NXT event. So NXT is the developmental league for WWF. It doesn't necessarily mean that the wrestlers are bad. In fact, the opposite is true. It's usually where you see a lot of independent superstars
technical stuff.
They debut on NXT and learn the WWF style, and like they get to have a few matches broadcast on the network, so that fans will have a body of work to be familiar with and to refer back to when they debut on the main roster. And the big story coming into this is that there were 3 guys who were very recently signed from Ring of Honor. which is the biggest independent circuit in the U.S. All of whom basically wanted their entire career to be in the WWF, and they all got signed around the same time.
Is that where Drugs Bunny comes from?
Drugs Bunny? Is that a real wrestler?
Yes, in Hood Slam. He's like the face of Hood Slam.
I have never heard of Drugs Bunny.
He comes out and he's Bugs Bunny, and he comes out in a puff of cocaine.
I see.
Yeah.
What?
That's
throws joints at the crowd. Yeah.
That's obscure even by my standards.
Well, I listened to the Giant Bombcast, and they were really
Okay.
into Hood Slam, and then Hood Slam got really popular because of the Giant Bombcast. So it's just a low class affair, even amongst wrestling. But
Oh, by the way, speaking of which, when you
supposed to be a
go
lot of fun.
watch Southpaw Regional Wrestling Season 2, and you see it has hundreds of thousands of views, that was because of us.
Yes.
it's the CoreCon plug.
Yeah.
The CoreCon bump, rather.
The bump.
No.
Consciousness,
Instead of I know the bump is the thing, but we could say we gave like several 100,000 CCs.
I like that.
You owe us internet dollars,
Yeah.
Mr. McMahon.
Yeah. Okay.
So supposedly Vince McMahon is notorious for doing this, for like going to like major networks that are even larger than he is and demanding more money and then getting laughed out of the building. But Vince McMahon lives in a bubble of wrestling. He has no idea that the
Like
size
he's
of
the king of such a small pond.
He has no idea how big his company is in relation to other companies. Like, he's very wealthy. He's a billionaire. His company is huge. You know, they're one of the largest rated programs in all of cable. But he's not like NBC Universal. Like, he has no leverage over them.
Well, NBC Universal is not just like one product. It's all of the products.
Yeah, exactly. It would be like well, Ring of Honor is owned by Sinclair Broadcasting, which is another large media conglomerate. So it would be like them, like if Vince McMahon couldn't muscle them around because they're owned by another company bigger than he is.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of very odd stories about Vince McMahon, and I feel like some of them, like, it's borderline apocryphal at this point. Now that he is like approaching 70 and cannot like validate or invalidate any of these stories anymore. Like, supposedly he swears at himself when he sneezes because he hates that he has to sneeze. Like, it bothers him that he sneezes. Like, he feels like it's a personal weakness.
Huh. Okay.
There was a
I'm
rumor
sorry that your body expelled dust from it successfully, like it should be.
He hates peeing.
Yeah.
Oh boy! Well, you should hear his number twos, like just swearing up and down to the toilet. So
he just yells at the bowl afterwards.
Damn you all to hell!
It's like, I'm glad to be rid of you. You're dead to me.
I wish I could do this to Stephanie.
Yeah. It is a true statement that supposedly he had been pushing for an incest angle with Stephanie for a very long time on WWE programming, and he never got it.
Well, that's a good thing.
And that's for the better.
Yeah, small favors.
Probably Stephanie talked him out of it, which is probably a good thing. Very much a good thing.
So anyway, part of what also distinguishes NXT from the main roster is that on the main roster they have all these masters to please. They have all these corporate sponsors to deal with. They're always trying to push people. They're trying to push this guy Jinder Mahal, I'd mentioned him previously, as the face of SmackDown because he might be popular in India and will help them penetrate that market. They have Shinsuke Nakamura as a major Japanese wrestler as part of their penetration into the Japanese market. They're hiring these Chinese wrestlers because they're selling the network in China. They're pulling themselves in a lot of different directions in the main roster, whereas NXT is a very pure and concise wrestling show. To put them one next to the other, SummerSlam was a 6-hour show with 13 wrestling matches on it, and it was exhausting. NXT is about 2.5 hours, and it was 5 matches, and they were all fantastic. It was excellent. It's exactly as long as I want to go to a wrestling show for. I don't think I could stand being in that arena with those fans for longer than 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Especially like it's not like a baseball game where they cut off the beer sales in the 7th inning. These guys are come drunk and then get drunker.
Wow.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but they're very present and loud all the time. So the the stars of NXT are the women's champion, Asuka, who is one of the longest reigning champions in WWF history. She debuted in October of 2015, and she has never lost a match.
Wow.
Since she debuted. It's I think she's got something like a 200 match winning streak, which actually surpasses
almost
Goldberg's.
like they write her to be that way, though.
Yeah.
That's a huge accomplishment.
Yes, it's
a huge accomplishment to gain the favor of the writing staff.
It's awfully political, right? So, like, for someone who comes in as a non-native English speaker, for them to have that much faith in her ability to put out good matches night after night is still a pretty big deal. Non-ironically, sure. On top of the humor.
Well, there's a reason why she's winning. It's because people like her and like to watch her, right? So she's extremely popular.
That isn't always the case. So I mentioned Jinder Mahal, right? So he was a nobody, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he became the champion on SmackDown. Partially because they wanted to have, it was widely rumored they wanted to have a superstar of Indian descent as a champion because it would sell subscriptions to Indian subscribers. That it would produce a draw, and it is interesting, but. To have a guy who's basically a virtual nobody and to turn him into a star, it takes a lot of time and effort, and it means that you have to not necessarily force him down people's throats, but you have to. It becomes tautological after a while, where if you keep putting a guy in big matches, it doesn't matter if he deserves to be there or not. Like, his matches start becoming big matches just by dint of the fact that he's always in them.
Yeah.
Like, Roman Reigns has gone through this already. Every match that Roman Reigns is in has that big match feel, even though there was a tremendous amount of fan resistance and he got booed a lot for being pushed too hard. Now they've invested so much time and effort into him that every match that he's in feels like a big match, even though he's a fucking Hanzo main, you know? Like, but, for Jinder, like, they've spent a lot of time and effort, even though most people were like, what the fuck is going on? Who is this guy, and why is he suddenly champion ahead of, like, everybody else on the roster when he hadn't won a match on television in, like, years? And they did a lot. They actually paired him with two cruiserweights that were also of Indian descent called the Singh brothers, and they're his retainers. And they're a little bit shorter than him, but they use all these, like, very careful tricks of the camera to make him look like he's, like, 8 feet tall all the time, especially juxtaposed next to these two guys. And they give him this Titantron with this, like, slowly unfolding. They have this new entrance ramp that has a monitor and an LCD screen all the way down to the ring. So when he comes out, they have this red carpet, or at least his first few entrances, that rolls down the LCD screen all the way down.
Nice.
To the ring. It's actually really cool.
That's awesome.
And
yeah.
The theatrics that they've worked on make it feel like he's a big deal, and that took time, and it meant that they had to go do their own thing in spite of what the fans thought they wanted to see. And I think it'll pay off. Like, he's still very limited in the ring, but he's supposed to be because he's a heel, at least to the American audience. So he's not supposed to do really big, satisfying moves. You're supposed to want to see him lose. You're supposed to think that he deserves to lose. Because he's not a good guy.
Either the payoff for that is the anti-payoff of him being, of you denying what you want, or him actually losing.
Right. So. He should lose after everybody's screaming that they're totally sick of seeing him win, and then he should still win maybe 1 or 2 more matches, and then lose after that when everybody's just completely sick to death of him. So that's like the antithesis of Asuka. Asuka is like the greatest female wrestler they've had in a very long time, and she has been the champion of NXT for I think 507 days now.
Jesus.
And she put on another amazing match with another up-and-coming female wrestler, Ember Moon, whose gimmick is, I guess she's some kind of gypsy. It's not that important to her character. But that match brought the house down. It was fantastic. So the storyline is that Asuka is becoming more jealous of other wrestlers coming for her title, so she's starting to resort to more heel-like tactics, like hiding behind the referee and like playing possum, and then trying to grab the other wrestler.
She's getting paranoid.
She's getting very paranoid about. So she's becoming almost a tweener instead of a straight heel. So most likely that character arc will complete itself sometime around WrestleMania of next year at the associated NXT show there, and then Asuka will come up to the main roster.
I would imagine this is when finally somebody should beat her because there's the ever looming threat of somebody beating her, right?
Yep. They're setting up the Mae Young Classic, which is a 32-woman single elimination tournament. They're going to air throughout the end of August into September. They basically scoured the independent circuits for the best 32 female wrestlers they could find to sign them and refill the women's division, and maybe even produce a show centered on women's wrestling. For the network.
Was Mae Young the person with
Yes, Mae Young. So I'm sorry. Repeat that.
Yeah, no, sorry. I was just gonna ask. Was Mae Young the person with the hand, the son?
Yes, Mae Young was the woman who gave birth to a hand on WWF television.
That is the weirdest thing freaking ever.
Yeah, it's so Mae Young. We've discussed a little bit about Moolah and Mae Young. They were like partners back in the early days of the development of WWF. Moolah was not a very good person. She was basically a pimp for women's wrestlers. She would train them, and then she would loan them out to other promotions. She would get them hooked on drugs, and then she would loan them out to other promotions in exchange for her getting to retain her national title.
God damn.
Mae Young was the muscle of that operation, more or less. Like she would like sleep with promoters and then threaten to beat the crap out of them if they didn't give her money, and then she would and if she did, she would tell people that this guy got beaten up by a girl, and that they would lose the respect of like the men in the locker room. Jeez. They had a whole operation going on. It was not good for American women's wrestling, and like
no kidding.
Moolah was not a good wrestler at all. So the damage that she did to what people expected women's wrestling to look like, because she was so bad at it, but she was always the champion, affected the way that the WWF structured women's matches for like decades to come, and it produced this stigma that women's wrestling couldn't be as good as men's wrestling, when none of them deserved that.
There was this kind of like treatment for a very long time, since we were in high school and middle school and beyond, where the women's wrestling was basically just treated as like not even just side matches, but like just meat matches. Like they were, it was like one step above mud wrestling.
Sometimes it was mud wrestling.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it would literally be like a strip match. Like the one of them would win by pulling the evening gown.
The bra and panty match.
Yeah,
matches,
like that
right?
that was a real thing. Like it's pretty dire even by modern standards. Like,
yeah, they would never do that now, right?
Well, no, I mean, even that really only changed a few years ago, when the WWF really redoubled and committed to taking their women's division seriously. There's always been this sort of succession of women who came into the business, and they were recruited from the ranks of the fitness models. That was the look that they were going for. And so a lot of these women came in and they were just not talented. Some of them became very talented, but it wasn't a prerequisite.
Yeah.
So since the advent of the training center down in Florida and the advent of NXT, they hired a top flight trainer named Sarah Del Rey, and she's the one who's produced a lot of the talent that's come up through NXT onto the main roster now, and that's sort of revolutionized American women's wrestling, at least as it pertains to WWF.
I find that particularly alarming because, like, in Japan, like, women's wrestling's been taken seriously for a very long time.
Oh, definitely, yeah. So, like, in the 90s, around the mid-90s, the WWF had a deal with All Japan Pro Wrestling to bring some of their talent over. They brought Aja Kong and like a bunch of other Bull Nakano and a bunch of other really famous Japanese Joshi wrestlers, but they dumped them because they made the men look bad.
Oh wow!
Wow, that's awful.
Yeah.
That's like the worst. That's like the worst that I can think of. Like it's just you throwing keeping people down because they're actually better. Like,
yeah,
that's the worst kind of exclusion. Like you see it all the time. You see it particularly in academia. Men in academia put women down like that as well. It's particularly egregious, I think.
I don't want to move too far aside, but we just saw an example of this in this Google memo that's been in the news recently. It's just another head of the Hydra, so to speak. I know we don't like to belabor certain political points too often on this show.
No, but we are human beings that have our own opinions, right? We're like-minded too.
These are all different faces of the same die.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So I had mentioned Jinder Mahal and about how getting certain things over takes time and effort, and finally it seems like the WWF has committed time and effort to their women's division. I know I mentioned this a few months ago to you, Vice, that they had been putting a lot of emphasis on a feud in the women's division on the Raw show between Sasha Banks and Charlotte, who were two of the first stars to debut from the NXT system and make a real name for themselves on the main roster. They had 7 consecutive title matches, I think 4 on pay-per-view and 3 on Raw, and several of them main evented both the paper. They were the first women to main event a main roster pay-per-view. They were the first women to participate in a Hell in a Cell match, and the first women in a long time to close out several editions of Raw. And I wouldn't even say that they were the best wrestlers on those cards. Like, they were not even the best Hell in a Cell match at that pay-per-view.
But people wanted to see them, right?
That's not the point. Like, it's not even that people thought it was the best. It's that you have to invest in something as a main event before the fans believe it. They have to know. Like,
they have to build it up. They have to advertise it. They have to get people the fans to buy into it. Mm-hmm. It takes a long time to foster goodwill in a fan base.
Right. Part when you talk about guys like CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, I know, Vice, they're 2 of your favorite wrestlers because they're underdogs, but they're underdogs who went out and main evented Raw like every day. CM Punk, he was like undefeated on television except in pay-per-view matches for like a year. You have to believe, you have to push them for them to remain underdogs enough that you know that they're amazingly talented. And then the payoff
you have to give them the shot,
over
right?
the hump. Yeah,
you need to give them the shot, the same kind of shot that a superstar like one of those guys.
Yeah, it has to be plausible that they might get a shot someday. Otherwise, people just won't care anymore. They'll give up.
Yeah.
So this women's division thing is largely the same. It doesn't matter. They might not necessarily be the most impactful or talented, but they are very, very, very good, and they deserve to main event at least an occasional pay-per-view, when the situation calls for it and the feud is good. They deserve as much of a chance as any 2 male members of the roster. They're that good. And this was a sign that the WWF was putting their resources behind them.
Because there are definitely times when the storyline's lame, and people call them out on it. Why not just go with, the women's storyline, if it's compelling, you don't have to stick with a lame one that's going on. You could just
and in
put
this
your
case
chops elsewhere.
In this case, it is just like the 2 best women in the division who want to prove once and for all which one is the queen of the crop, basically.
And like that's of the crop.
Yeah.
Thanks, Randy Savage.
Yeah.
That was my favorite promo that is acted. The Ultimate Warrior, anything that he does is my favorite, but he that was him being him. Like, right. Randy Savage was at least planned what he did.
Yeah.
And that was good.
Just keeps producing coffee creamer.
Unless you believe that he just carries around 12 cups of coffee creamer with him at all times, which I guess,
what a showman. What a showman.
For all you know, he's like it's just the thing that he does, Randy Savage and coffee creamer. You never know.
No, I remember OldManStompy.
He just has Slim Jims in his pockets.
No, I remember OldManStompy. You had mentioned that one, the coffee creamer promo. I didn't even notice it at first, but like, he had put one of the coffee creamers like on his own head for
and it fell.
Yeah, like he eventually turns to the side for whatever reason, and it falls off, and he like forgot it was
So
there
good.
and kind of twitches for just a second in surprise, like what? Oh right, and it just keeps going.
It's my favorite part. My favorite part.
So yeah, Asuka is the women's champion, of course, but there's also a heavyweight champion of NXT. His name is Bobby Roode. Another interesting story. He's 40. He was a TNA guy for about 12 or 13 years, I think. And when TNA finally more or less went under, he joined NXT very late in his career. He has what might be the best entrance music in years.
Really?
His entrance is incredible. It's called Glorious Domination. It sounds like the chorus of like every 80s song ever, but the fans get so into it that I recommend that you listen to it after the show. The loop is only about a minute long, but it begins with him sort of on the stage in a Ric Flair styled like conductor's robe, like all red and gold and sequins, and he's got his hands posed up in the air and and it looks like he's turning to the crowd, but actually he's on a turnstile, like turning around while he's like standing like this, like he's a wax statue. And it begins with just a 30-second piano line that's like played on a video player piano on that like LCD entrance ramp. It's so over the top, and then he does like 3 loops of his song just walking from that turntable down to the ring, and the fans just eat it up. It's amazing how much a good entrance can do for a wrestler, because as a wrestler, like, he's fine. There's nothing like particularly special about him. He's very talented. He's good at ring psychology. He deserves to be the champion. His matches have been good heel matches where, you know, he spends most of his time trying to keep the face grounded from doing all their flippy, you know, spinning moves or whatever, their flashy finishers. He has a very simplistic finisher. It's just a DDT, which is the one where they pick a guy up and drive their head into the ground. It's a Jake the Snake Roberts finisher. That's how old it is. But he's got the charisma. Like, that entrance allows him to. It's by itself makes every match that he's in feel like a big deal.
Okay.
And like when he comes up to the main roster. Same thing with Shinsuke Nakamura, who also has that like crazy violinist theme. That all people think about when they see him is like, oh my god, I can't believe how amazing this entrance is going to look at WrestleMania.
Because it's going to have all the pyrotechnics and all the budget behind it, right?
Right, exactly. Like it's incredible what they pull out for WrestleMania. Like they spend millions on that stage. So if Bobby Roode's back, if Bobby Roode's up on the main roster for WrestleMania, I would love to see that. In general, I had a great time at the show. The only other hanging storyline is they have these 3 guys from Ring of Honor who recently signed, and they attacked all the male champions, the tag team champion and the heavyweight champion, after their matches. So that's where the storyline's going to go from here. These 3 guys, they formed a stable, and they might like accrete some other recent signings from Ring of Honor to form a faction, which is exciting because WWF hasn't had like faction warfare in a really long time for one reason or another, and it's actually part of what makes
they don't have like the different brands like they used to, or they're trying to build them back up, right? Isn't that what they're doing?
Even within the brands, they don't have like teams. Like, they have tag teams, but that's about as large as a group becomes.
But you don't have like the NWO, that kind of thing.
Oh, sure, yeah. But like in New Japan, they definitely have that. Like, even if it doesn't come up all that often, almost every wrestler is part of like 4 or 5 major stables. And that seems to be the direction NXT is kind of heading in. They're trying to build and like gather people together for what might be like faction warfare, and it's kind of exciting because it will change the feel of NXT. It will provide a product which is different from anything else that the WWF has right now.
That's good. I would think that differentiation is where they want to go, because why compete? Why have a similar competing product that is going to be worse?
Right. Why compete with yourself? You produce like 7 hours of television a day. Why do they all have to be the same? One of them should stand out. And at least...
Yeah, make a unique product out of it. I think it's very smart.
Right.
Great.
So yeah, I got to sing along with Glorious Domination. That was fun.
Yes.
that more or less closed the evening for me, and then I went home and watched SummerSlam, which was like half as exciting and twice as long. So
just like CoreCon is every single week.
Yeah, speak for yourself.
I speak for all of us.
That's true. You are the host. Speaking of which, anytime you feel like wrapping this up,
before I start snoring as well as the rest of our audience.
A podcast so boring it leaves the host snoring.
Wow, that's that. Now talk about esoteric. My God.
Well, you know what's funny is I actually did fall asleep during one of our recordings, and you can audibly hear me struggling while reading the outro when Retro was on.
In fairness,
Reactive.
it was not because of the nature of the podcast.
No, I was just fucking tired.
Yeah.
I was exhausted and it was late as shit.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's 1:00 right now as we're recording.
Yeah, no, and we're all adults that have like
we have
real
jobs in the morning. Yeah.
Sometimes these like bio breaks are unavoidable. I was just watching a Magic podcast where they left in like 30 seconds of this one guy trying to hold in a sneeze and like audibly talking about how aggravating this sneeze is, and they must have thought it was like funny enough they left the entire segment in.
Yeah, why not? I mean, I think it would have been better to leave in like Retro finding me asleep, like because at least it would give an explanation for why I sound like half dead while reading the outro. So, but I mean,
Summer Games Done Quick just takes it out of you. What can I say?
Well, one day this will happen, like where someone who didn't do the intro will do the outro, and like someone who was on the podcast will disappear. Like we have never like had an emergency that took one of us away from the podcast during the hour. And like a lot of the time, it would be invisible.
Luminaire left
Luminaire
once,
just
but
pieced out in the middle of one.
Yeah, I mean, he announced that though.
All right, bye. But he didn't let us know ahead of time. We were like, okay.
But he said it on the cast. Like it's not like he's just gone.
We've had the opposite, where I like showed up for a recon in an episode where I wasn't on the Tuesday.
Yeah.
OldManStompy, what are you doing here?
Here's our cousin Oliver.
I was in the walls. Like I was taking a nap during CoreCon. I wasn't like conscious for the.
We brought him in because Pyro wasn't
conscious.
cute anymore. It wasn't cute anymore.
I remember when Pyro was good.
He was never good.
That shade.
Ooh, he won't listen. At least this far into it.
Okay, they're trailing off. I get it.
Alright, and this is the show for this week. Please remember to subscribe to the Corrective Consciousness YouTube and SoundCloud pages. While there, please give us thumbs up, likes, and 5-star ratings on iTunes. It helps us promote and spread awareness of the show, and any bit of encouragement helps keep the show going. You can also catch us on Tuesday for our sister's podcast, Corrective Consciousness, podcast about our lives and love of pop culture, and I swear I am not reading any prompts. Finally, you can friend me as VyseTheBold at VyseTheBold on Steam, PSN, Xbox Live, and Twitter.
And you can catch me on my YouTube channel, Lotus Prince. You can hit me up on Twitter at Lotus Prince, which is all one word. And finally, if you are interested in seeing my videos early, getting in on exclusive live streams, or even selecting upcoming games for me to Let's Play, then maybe consider swinging by my Patreon, which is patreon.com/LotusPrince, which is again all one word.
And you can find me as OldManStompy on basically every major gaming and social media network except for Steam. I haven't actually uploaded a video to my YouTube in like a year and a half. I don't play any games other than Final Fantasy XIV anymore, so I don't know how much good it's going to do you. Might as well just post in the YouTube comments of this video.
Just wait until there's an MMO of Professor Layton. And
yeah, I'll wait till the spiritual successor to Dual Hearts.
Damn you, Compile, make something else other than trash.
Someday I'll play Monster Hunter, and I'll hate myself.
Yeah.
And
Well, the PC one's supposed to be, actually good.
good relative to what?
Ooh.
To the garbage we've been playing and putting up with for many years.
You know what? Some days I wake up in the morning and I take a real good shit, but I'm not proud of it, and I wouldn't play it on my PlayStation.
Wait. You're not proud of that kind of thing?
Mr. Ryu's gonna have a word with you.
I've actually already been called a degenerate in our Final Fantasy group because it's a lot of the same people who Mr. Ryu plays Monster Hunter with, plus me.
Well, no, maybe it wasn't an insult. Monster Hunter is generation, so you're a degenerate.
I'm ungenerate.
Yeah, you don't get involved.
Non-generate.
Yeah.
All right, I think we have the sleepy ha-has. We'll catch you on Tuesday. Catch you guys later.
Until next time, everyone.
Cheers.